Is Terence Crawford's resume really that trash? I mean, Canelo's talking a lot of garbage about Terence Crawford, destroying and trashing Terence Crawford's resume, his best wins and whatnot. But is his resume really that bad? I feel like Crawford, he can't control who's around, it's like a draft class. It's like the NBA draft class. Crawford can't control who's around at that time. He fought who he could fight. Whoever Bob Arum put in front of him, that's who he fought. I feel like ultimately Terence Crawford has the best resume with what he could get, with what was out there, in my opinion. So you can't really fault him for that. I feel like that was Canelo's major selling point of, why he beats Terence Crawford and why he's so confident, and that's fine. It doesn't matter whatever Canelo's thinking to motivate him to beat Crawford. But ultimately, if we're really talking about Crawford's resume, yeah, it's not the best resume by any means. It's not a Pacquiao resume, it's not a Floyd Mayweather resume, it's not a Canelo Alvarez resume, but that's not Crawford's fault. You can't control who you fight in a lot of your career in the sport of boxing. That's just not the way it works. If you look at Top Rank is so big on building their fighters, especially now. They're all about building up the prospects, and there's a blueprint for it. You stay with Top Rank for a little while. When you figure out the game, you understand the logistics of lawyers, contracts, and whatnot, then you're like, all right, I don't really need Top Rank anymore, and you kind of spread your wings and fly away, right? That's the whole point. That's what Terence Crawford did with his, career. That's what he did with his entire career up until he got that Spence fight. After he got the Sean Porter fight, that fight went the way it did, and then, after that, he went away from Top Rank, and, then he started making fights, Spence, and then he went to Madrimov, and now he's getting a Canelo fight. Now he's making the money. Now he's getting these big names because he's built himself through Top Rank. You don't get to where Terence Crawford is without doing all that. And he already fought all the guys that he could possibly fight, at his weight classes. So it's not really in his control that his resume isn't the best. It's more so who's in your draft class. That's what it's about. Who's around in your time, that you could realistically fight. People are gonna be like, oh, we could have fought Pacquiao. Oh, Crawford could have fought Floyd. But Crawford wasn't really on the scene like that. His name wasn't big enough for people to be like, all right, you definitely got to fight him now. It wasn't the way Pacquiao and Floyd, they were on a collision course. There was no doubt that these guys were going to fight each other. Crawford only had that with Spence, and that fight happened. So I still give credit to Crawford for beating Spence. I don't think it was the best version of him. I think that fight should have happened way before, probably right after Spence fought Sean Porter. That's when Crawford and Spence should have really fought. But it is what it is. This is boxing. Things aren't perfect. But I just didn't like how Canelo was talking shit about Crawford's resume, because he can't control that. You're acting like he ducked somebody. Crawford isn't or hasn't really ducked anybody. Obviously that Spence fight could have happened earlier, but the politics of boxing are so convoluted nowadays. You can't just expect, just because Crawford and Spence are the best fighters in the world, the best at welterweight at the time, all right, make the fight happen. There's money involved, there's negotiations that have to take place, contracts have to be sent and signed. So it's Crawford made the fight eventually, so he deserves respect for that. He made the fight, he got his Mayweather-Pacquiao moment with Errol Spence Jr., and he had a crazy performance, a more stellar performance than Floyd had against Pacquiao. But we all know that that wasn't the best version of Spence. Now, knowing that people were going to say that, Crawford's like, all right, let me go get Canelo multiple weight divisions above him. So, Canelo needs to understand that Crawford's doing the best with what he has. You can't just create a fighter and say, all right, let's create a fight and let's put this on my resume and make me a star. That's not how it works. You have to do it the right way, or else things don't work out. That's just how boxing is. Crawford has done, like I said, done the best with what he could, so I think, Crawford has a great resume for who was out there, but in terms of the grand scheme of things, I agree with Canelo, but you're fighting the guy. I agree Crawford's resume isn't great, but you can't say that if you're Canelo Alvarez. Why would you say that about a guy you're about to fight and you haven't even beaten him yet? So if you lose, it looks really bad if you're Canelo Alvarez, and if you win, obviously we know how boxing fans are. They're gonna say, oh, you were supposed to do that. But me personally, I'd give Canelo respect if he beats Crawford. It's not an easy fight. Probably one of the most intricate fights that he's gonna have, you know, in a while, or that he has had in a while. So Crawford's not an easy puzzle to solve, but if Canelo's able to stop him, I think he really needs to stop him now with everything that Canelo's been saying in terms of Crawford's not that good. You know, he's a great fighter, but ultimately his resume is nothing. So we'll see what happens. Let me know in the comments who you guys got. I still got to rock with Bud Crawford to beat Canelo Alvarez, but let me know in the comments who you guys have. But thank you guys for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.